We want to talk about challenges and solutions across research, markets, farmer-led models, and policy. My name is Lisa Ketzer, and I'm working for Bioland, which is an organic farmers association based in Germany and South Tyrol. And I will be moderating today's session. As we all know, carbon farming gained significant momentum in the last years and may be a crucial strategy in the fight against climate change. In this session, we can agree that farmers in certain circumstances can benefit from carbon farming. However, translating the science of carbon farming into practical applications is still very challenging, and we need effective financing mechanisms with clear safeguards for farmers in future. Today we will explore these complexities through various lenses, from research, market-driven approaches, farmer-led models, and policy. We want to foster the dialogue and collaboration among stakeholders to scale carbon farming sustainably on organic and regenerative farms. So a warm welcome to all of you. We have an amazing lineup with leading organizations in this field. First, we will hear from Bautze, working for FiBL Schweiz, which is a research institution, who will provide critical insights into the scientific aspects of carbon farming and carbon credit frameworks. Next, Paul Martin from ReGeneration will share the experiences working with farmers directly to measure soil carbon and issuing carbon credits. Afterwards, Chiara Michelone from Produttori AOR will present a farmer-led support model for carbon farming, emphasizing the collective support needed for sustainable transition. Finally, Hanna Winkler from IFOAM Organics Europe will discuss the opportunities and challenges of implementing carbon farming into policy with a special focus on organic farms. After the presentations, we will have a discussion and an open Q&A round together with you, and you are also very welcomed to actively participate in our session today. Thank you, everyone, and we will now start with Paul Martin with Bautze from FiBL Schweiz. Thank you very much.
Yes, I was asked to give a little bit more the science perspective on the carbon issue related to organic agriculture and regenerative agriculture. Although I have to admit I heard some voices that there have been too many scientific presentations so far, but I still found it important to really put the focus on the perspective of organic and regenerative farming here at this summit. So if we look at the history of what organic agriculture is, we see that soil, organic carbon, soil health and fertility are really at the core principles of organic agriculture. I'm coming from the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture, where we hold and strengthen one of the long-term trials of comparing organic, biodynamic and conventional farming systems. But it's really part of the tradition of organic to look at soils and to look at healthy and fertile soils also in the perspective of organic carbon. So we have quite an experience on researching the different kind of soil practices that enhance carbon sequestration, such as reduced tillage, composting, cover crops, and we are happy to share those results here today and beyond today's situation. So I don't want to repeat too much. We have been here for some days, and I just want to highlight in particular what the challenges are regarding carbon farming for the organic sector. So there we have in particular the challenge of additionality and the question of fairness. We also have the challenge for the regenerative farmers that certain risks are associated with increasing practices. You're happy to look at the reference, and I want to focus now on the additionality aspect, because the farmers in organic farming, they have often practiced the soil building practices for quite some time, So for them, it's sometimes difficult to implement new practices or additional ones. So if you want to go for carbon credits, you really have to keep in mind those organic farmers and raise the question, what kind of new practices can be implemented on organic farms that lead to an additional soil carbon sequestration without having the leakage effects of those practices. So this is something which really need to be monitored from the scientific perspective, and where I would really vote for the argumentation that should not only be climate mitigation in mind, but also other sustainability goals. We have a huge question for organic farms in particular, where the biomass comes from. So for example, in Switzerland, we have now the huge trend that a lot of the farmers apply biochar. But if we want to really implement this on more farms, we have to raise the consequence questions of those biochar applications, for example, in relation to the biomass flows in total. And also, FiBL is part of the Clean Farms project, where we've tried to monitor also and evaluate the practices implemented on organic farms. And I have to say that in the majority of the tools, the organic practices that are happening at the farms are not measurable and reportable in the tools currently existing on the market. So there we really have to look at how can organic farms be represented in those tools, and how can they be integrated in the whole process. I also have to say, so I'm really doing a lot of practical research, really directly being involved with the farmers, so not so much the modeling part, but more really the practical research. And I find an increasing expectation of the farmers that they will solve the world and the climate crisis by just increasing soil organic carbon. And I find that the pressure is really increasing on the farmers from the companies, but also from the farmers themselves. And there I think it's really important to communicate that if we are looking at the farms nowadays, the first priority should be to maintain the soil organic carbon instead of just focusing again and again on increasing it, because increasing it is shown in our long-term research, and we just had a session before the lunchtime, is really a difficult thing. It takes time, it takes a lot of expertise to not lose the carbon that you sequestered in the soil, and as I said, it's one factor that we have to look at if we want to look for a sustainable transformation of our agriculture system, but it should not only be the only one factor. I just mentioned this now a few times. So at FiBL, we support the long-term trial, more than 45 years of experience. There we see that soil organic carbon sequestration is possible. In particular, you will find that the biodynamic treatment and the organic treatment, which is the green and the blue line, are sequestering a little bit more carbon than the conventional systems in comparison. So these are the positive sides that organic farming can contribute. You're happy to look for further detail into the study. I will not manage to capture it all, but I think this graphic here also shows that carbon sequestration is one part. So on the left side, you see the carbon sequestration, which is highest for the biodynamic and organic sector. So this is the carbon sequestration part is showing below. And for the conventional farming, you will see that more carbon is emitted into the atmosphere compared to the others. But you also see that the nitrous oxide emissions are quite important and should not be left out of the picture. So this is something which again argues for a system where we have not just the carbon focused, but also a more system approach on really considering what the consequences of certain management practices are in the overall effect and not just on the carbon. We are also currently running a very interesting project, which is together with 55 farmers. They are having soil samplings, and they're taking part in a carbon crediting scheme together with a bank who finances the carbon credits for them. This is run throughout a whole region, so this is the Basel region in Switzerland. You saw that it's about 1,100 hectare area size, which is for Switzerland quite a good amount of area compared to the rest of Switzerland. And this project really starts in, or is having 3 different steps. So first, the farmers get compensation for just participating in the scheme. They are advised with farm advisors together to build up a soil humus build-up plan, and then evaluation is taking place, and at the end they're getting additional payments at the end of the project. They don't need to pay back if they have decreased soil carbon. They just get payments if they have increased something. And sampling is done on an annual basis to really show what are the current possibilities for really measuring and reporting carbon in a sufficient way. And both of the samples are analyzed in various labs so that we can also compare how the different analyzers really differ from one another. And you will see just very shortly in this graph that there is different measurement results of the different labs for the same soil sampling. So this shows that even if you have a good sampling and you get it measured in different labs, that the results will differ. And this, of course, has implications on how much is paid to the farmers, how much can be paid to the farmers. So it needs really also an annual correction factor to be a good, sound scientific monitoring scheme, which, as you can imagine, takes then quite some amount of money to do this. Here I would like to highlight two studies from our colleagues at the Justus Liebig University, where we also collaborate. Wiebke couldn't be here today, but it's very interesting because those studies really show the different kind of schemes existing on a case study basis, what could be advantages or disadvantages, how the different financing parts could look like. And you see here a long list of the scientific challenges and practical challenges associated with carbon credits. And I'm pretty sure that most of you here in this room are aware of those problems and of these hindering factors for really implementing them. So I would like to close very, very briefly with my recommendations that I think for the soil carbon credits, we are not there yet to leave them really on the EU level to be integrated, but we should leave them on the voluntary market because they are scientifically at the moment so difficult to be measured, to be evaluated, to be reported, that it's really a dangerous thing to look them, to consider them in the climate mitigation goal. And at the same time, they can be so expensive to make a proper sampling where this will then have problems for the farmers. So the question of who is really bearing the costs of the carbon credits is, I think, still a big thing to discuss. I'm not naive, so I think we can't hold the train anymore. So I think the carbon credits will come into policy. But if I would need to argue for carbon credits, then I would vote for biomass carbons rather than soil organic carbon credits because they are more easy to monitor scientifically. I would vote for action-based carbon credits rather than result-based schemes. I would vote for those practices which really have the most co-benefits associated for our agriculture transformation, and that organic farmers and regenerative farmers are considered in the application of this EU processes. And we also saw in our studies that there are local trends and regional trends. So if we analyze this, we saw that for some of the practices, we have climate trends leading to different results of soil organic carbon sequestration potentials. So this is important to be considered in the modeling at a later stage. And it's also important to really differentiate between the short-term effects and the permanent long-term effect of the carbon. If you want to do carbon crediting, from our experience, have a safe and sound contract with the farmers where they really know what they're dealing with, where they're really informed on how the regulations and the agreements between them are fixed in a good way. It was a good thing to really advise and integrate the farm advisors from the beginning of the projects because they could support the farmers in building a proper sound soil management, which is then also really motivating for the farmers. And I would really argue for limiting the administrative burden on the farmers because they are already on quite such a high pressure. And just to make it very clear from the scientific perspective, I have a lot of questions asked when it comes to carbon credits as being the climate solutions. because I'm not sure if it should really be the goal in agriculture to compensate a lot of the emissions rather than focusing on reducing fossil fuel emissions first. Or if we really want to go for a system which is more sustainable, helping the transformation, there I think the carbon credits can be a good thing to implement, but then it's more on this holistic perspective of doing something which is having co-benefits to the soil and other sustainability dimensions. Now I rushed a little bit. I hope I stick to my 10 minutes and would like to hand over to Paul to come more to the practical application.
Good afternoon, everyone. I work for ReGeneration. We are a project developer based in France, and we support farmers in France and Belgium with the VM042 Vera methodology. We support them to monetize their carbon in the VCM market. So what is really important, if we step back, is what's going on at the farm level. Any farmer makes a decision looking at what's going on per hectare. That's how we look at yield. That's how the farmer looks at profitability. So when we're talking about incentivizing farmer to implement regenerative practices, the first discussion we should have before inset, offset, how we do it, is how much money per hectare we're going to pay this farmer. And it has a different meaning in different geography. And this is what we focus on when we engage a farmer. It's what we can achieve with him and how we can pay him. Because if we don't deliver a certain value, we're never going to bring all the farmers on board. We can even talk about figures, to be precise. At the moment, carbon is the only thing we can monetize. So certification should come on other aspects and other benefits of regenerating farming. But at the moment, it's carbon that has a market, established framework, and that can allow to bring this value on a per hectare basis to the farmers. Company, they want to use VCM for the moment to meet their target goal. But at the end of the day, what we're doing, we also want to do it in the offset market after, in the inset market after, and we just want to also be able to use certification for co-benefits. The proposition we have for our farmers is 60% of the value of our credits goes to them. We really want to emphasize that we need to work with them on the long term, and this is key to ensure that the transition materialize. So it's one of what is lacking in the current CRCF framework is the short-term engagement that they are kind of emphasizing at the moment. So for us, it's a 10-year crediting period, 30 years monitoring, so we have this minimum 40 years where we kind of like look for permanence, but at the end of the day, the permanence will come if the farmer and the transition materialized and that he will keep farming regeneratively because it's more profitable. So it's all come down to the profitability per hectare. You pay him for the transition, the right price, and then the transition materialized and it's going to be permanent. We provide agronomic support. We allocate an agronomist for the first 5 years, and then depending on the need, we'll renew that. That's really important, and we'll talk about it when we talk about different kind of farmers, organic, early adopters, or conventional if we want to build brackets, even if it's more complicated. Farmers cannot really be classified into brackets. If we want to be very precise and stick to the point I want to make here, how much we pay the farmers. This is a breakdown, and I'm sharing with you like kind of our financials, of our gross margin. So this is percentage breakdown. 100% of the price of a credit. 55% goes cash to the farmer. 5% go to cover some agronomic cost. 7% for measurement, soil sampling. This is an assumption of some scale. I don't know if you guys attended the AgriCarbon, for example. Out of transparency, we work with them. They explain how with scale, you decrease sampling cost, then MRV, and then there's a gross margin on a per credit basis. So this is actually, you can look at it maybe in a euro term. The first VM042 project was listed in January, It's above $100 per credit. Not retired yet, so I don't take it as a market price. But this gives you a real view on how much money you give back to the farmer, which should be the center of the discussion to ensure that we onboard farmers and to ensure that we can reach permanent, which is what the buyers look for and which is what will drive the value of the credit. This is how we work on our projects. So we take a farmer on board year one. We have a model which is measure and model. So we're going to go soil sampling, do a soil sampling campaign, and we're going to use the result of the samples to calibrate a model. When we do that, we're able to have a model from year 1 to year 5. This model will allow us to know how much, to have an estimation of how much we sequester on a per hectare basis and how much unit credit we can sell. We go back in year 5, we soil sample again, we recalibrate the model. So this is really like a combination of soil sampling and long-term experiments where we feed the long-term experiments with more soil samples that come into a more refined model. And we keep going for a second phase from year 6 to year 10. So the idea is here that the key is it's not like is soil sampling good only or is model good. It's using long-term experiments to bring them at the project level, to inform those long-term experiments with more soil data that we get at our project level, and to refine a model, and to try to be as accurate as we can. But we have to look at the soil. Farmers want us to look at the soil. Frankly, like, we cannot run those projects just based on model and practice. My farmer, they tell me, you ask me to restitute some organic matters, I want to go look in the soil, where is this organic matter? And I want to be paid for it. They're like tangible things. And we need the science, we need the long-term experiments to calibrate the model at the beginning. And I hope the CRCF will create a framework where we can have a huge collaboration, and it needs to be defined how, where scientists share models and project developers give them back soil data that they gather at the project level. And we work all together. But that needs to be clearly defined, like how do you publish your data when you publish a model? How do we expect to see the data to be able to work with them? So this is something where I hope this data sharing system will at some point come into shape in the CRCF. Here I underlined like the key element that I think the CRCF is currently lacking from our standpoint with the robustness that we have in our certification and what we think buyers will pay for. We need to have, like, there's an over-reliance on standardized baseline. This concept that we're going to have a fixed number given and it's not explained how that is an average of SOC, like soil organic carbon, in an area. It's not farm-based. It's not how we can really like incentivize farmer to work and how we can sell robustness to buyers. So that it dilutes the concept of additionality. There's risk of greenwashing, over-crediting, under-crediting. Like, we really recommend to go back to farm-based baseline, based on practice at the farm level, soil sampling. The end use, like, we need to be able to have clear guidelines about how we can engage with the supply chain. I mean, we are on the VCM now. We want to work in the supply chain. We want to keep the same robustness because we want to go get the same amount of money for the farmers. So you need to have a clear explanation on how you're going to look at the supply chain with the inventory management, implementing the same thing with the farmer, measuring it the same way, but then obviously when you're in the supply chain, you look at ventilation of goods and stock management. When you're in the VCM, or in the offset, you don't have this problem of the goods because you're selling what is sequestered in the soil. And then it's, the last point is activity and monitoring period. The long-term engagement is key. Currently, the CRCF is kind of like underlying a minimum engagement of farmers that is not long enough for us to properly measure change in soil organic carbon, for the farmer to have time to really make his transition realized. So it's for permanent purposes, for accuracy in measurement, for robustness, and for the price we're going to get from buyers, we need long-term engagement. So if you look at the standard that we follow, it's 10-year crediting 30 years monitoring. They call it a 40 years minimum permanent, but the idea is that you want this to be permanent. So you want the regenerative transition to be in place. This is, I think, the most relevant also in relation to what my co-panelist Lynn said before. It's like, how do you include all type of farmers in the crediting system? And, you know, all what I say apply to everything. So it's not like VCM, offset, inset, we can talk about it. At the end of the day, at the farm level is the same thing. So the co-benefits, like if you talk about water quality, if you talk about biodiversity, food nutrient content, the social or economic aspect of the farm, like all that can be valued a way or another, but you're gonna need certification to be able to monetize it. Like that's what the buyers will look for, clear standards, clear certification, and the robustness needs to be there. The early adopters, I mean, we have some in our program. There's different ways to work with them. You know, you can, first of all, they keep storing. So it's not because you started some practices that you maxed out your storage capacity in your soil. So that's something that should always be kept into consideration. We also have ways in our certification to remove some practices that were already implemented and factor only practices that were not implemented, so we keep the additionality concept in place. And for example, also what is very important is we allocate agronomists in our project. So work out the agronomic roadmap that will allow, for example, organic farmers to take part of your program. Like an organic farm, you will always like be reluctant often, and I speak with the organic farmers I'm working with, the tillage is an issue. He's already doing everything right, and he actually needs to work the soil to be able to compensate the fact that he doesn't use a herbicide, for example. So then you start to have discussion, and it's, again, farm specific. You need to look at the size. Can you put in place rotation? Can you put in place grasslands? And it's each time like trying to solve the issue to reach both the regenerative goal and obviously keep the farm organic. So yeah, if I have to conclude, I would just say that the value for farmers should be the thing we all look at. We can then talk about inset, offset. But at the end of the day, robustness, it's what buyers will look for. Transparency is absolutely required. And at the moment, I think that the combination of soil sampling and modeling is the most robust thing we can do. Thank you. And,
okay. Thank you, Paul. Hi, everyone. I'm Chiara Michelone from Italy. I'm an agronomist working with the FiBL, an NGO. We work with regenerative and organic agriculture, mainly across 3 different areas of work, like international cooperation, technical assistance and training for farmers and technicians, and citizens education. And today I'm representing the Italian Association of Producers for Organic and Regenerative Agriculture, bringing our experience. This is a mainly producer association, born in 2024, and just a few weeks later we had a launch event of the association, which vision is to really involve the farmers and people in regeneration of soil, ecosystems, but also building relations between all different actors. And we have a really strong accent on empowering farmers and really bring food sovereignty. But why an association of producers? Because, especially in the last years, the regenerative agriculture is intended mainly in a reductionist way, so it's only a set of practice that's are important, that of course we are here to regenerate soil, regenerate biodiversity, ecosystem, but for us it's really important also to highlight the added value that building relationships and building communities between farmers, producers, consumers, and not only can help, in which way it can help to really implement carbon farming practice, regenerative practice, and that can bring to a really regeneration process through the territories. So these are our shared values, so solidarity, equity, and accessibility, and sharing of course, experiences, but also problems that may come up day by day implementing practice in fields. So there was really a need for producers to unite and strengthen and support each other also, and bring their voice also in a political and institutional context. And this is not intended at all to be a certification, but a sort of alternative approach inspired on a PGS, so participatory guarantee systems, in which new farmers that want to enter the associations can be supported by other members like farmers, technicians, and so on. They have to firstly assess their sort of regeneration status of their farms through a survey we build up together with the technicians and farmers. And according to this survey, they receive at the end a sort of a red, yellow, or a green light. If they have a green light, they can use a little logo of the association. If not, and if they want to remain and to start a regeneration process, they can receive, they can receive a support from trained agronomists and technicians to build an agronomic plan and a transition process to their farms. But they are intending to redo a survey also for farmers that have received a green light during the year, just to promote a continuous improvement, and they can, yes, of course, be supported throughout the time. How is this survey? We built together a framework of indicators with different areas of monitoring, in which carbon is, of course, an important part, but it's a part of the whole systems of farm, because we want to assess farms in their systemic way to be able to build an agronomic plan that can be sustainable and long-lasting during time. So we have different areas like soil, livestock, biodiversity, water management, and of course socio-economic aspects. And at the end, they receive sort of radar graphs in which it can be also exploded in different sub-indicators. And this is really intended to be a tool useful for farmers to start their journey through regeneration. And in addition to this survey, we also conduct different on-field analysis and measurements like soil analysis, soil biodiversity analysis like arthropods, and also some visual assessment and empiric evaluation with farmers also they can do by themselves. And so for us it is important this to be really a process we know farmers need strong technical and trained technical assistance based on regenerative farming practice to build something that can be sustainable financially and also from the agronomic perspective to receive income not only from carbon but also that can be holistically sustainable. Also, for us, it's really important to monitoring progress. So, for this reason, we found really important to have a continuous improvement plan and monitoring tools like the previous ones. And also, one thing that's really, really important also is the knowledge sharing and the co-creation of knowledge. So, sharing experiences not only between farmers and between farmers and technicians, but also also the problem that came up during the implementation of this practice by doing day-to-day work. So. This is really a strong point, and yeah. So in conclusion, we believe this model, farmer-led, can make a difference between for the regeneration of territories, enabling a long-lasting process and the implementation of carbon farming regenerative practice, and also a strong focus. We need a strong focus on co-creation of knowledge, so not top-down, but bottom-up, and really listening what are needs of farmers. And so for us, it is a key point that can enable large-scale transitions towards carbon farming and regenerations of soils and agricultural systems. So thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Chiara. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hanna Winkler, and I'm from IFOAM Organics Europe, which is the European umbrella organization for organic food and farming. That means we are covering the whole organic supply chain. We have members that are organic farming associations, organic certifiers, organic processors, and organic retailers. So we really take that value chain approach within our association. And I would like to focus in my talk a bit on how organic carbon farming, climate farming is represented in policy frameworks and what are the challenges associated with it. Apologies. In the project Organic Climate Net, there was a definition developed or key elements developed on what organic climate farming means. So it was called organic climate farming and not organic carbon farming. Maybe that's already a bit of a hint of the more holistic view, I would say, this definition takes. And the key elements are first and foremost climate mitigation. I mean, that's the obvious one, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, sequestering carbon in soils and biomass. The second aspect is climate adaptation. So improving the resilience of the farm system to increasing extreme weather events, but at the same time also adapting to changing growing seasons, pest pressures, etc. The third point is co-benefits. So it's not only about carbon and climate, but it's about impact on biodiversity, soil, animal health and welfare, and erosion, for example. The fourth point is economic aspects. That means not only the income, of course the income is very important, but also to look at the interconnectedness of market forces, how is it embedded in local economies, so to take a bigger view on economic aspects than price and income signals. The systems approach, so creating holistic and resilient farming systems and thinking them in interconnectedness with the surrounding in terms of environment and ecosystem it's embedded in, but also the community and social structures it's part of. And lastly, the additional consideration that everything around what policies and incentives are in place to shape carbon farming. Very importantly, access to information, training, advisory services, but also existing collaboration with researchers, but also fellow farmers. And all of these 6 key elements have to be considered and addressed if we want to create an enabling environment for farmers to shift their practices and take up climate or carbon farming. Organic farming takes a systems approach. So what do we mean by that? It's not about maximizing one aspect, one part of the farming system, but it's about improving all of the aspects that are important and all of the impacts that farming has on the environment, but also socioeconomic aspects. So it's of course about improving soil quality and biodiversity, but it's also refraining from the use of synthetic pesticides, minimizing pesticide residues, and by that also reducing the exposure to pesticides for farmers, for example. So also the health benefits are very important. But what we can still see is that in a lot of frameworks, the carbon tunnel vision is still very predominant. So a focus on carbon removals, carbon emissions, but neglecting all of the other aspects that are in fact important if we want to transition our agri and food system towards more sustainability. And so from the organics perspective, what are the current shortcomings in existing methodology, but also in methodologies currently being developed like the CRCF? What we can see is, while I think everyone agrees biodiversity is important, clean water is important, and I think everyone says, like, yeah, it has to be part of it, but when we look at what's actually in the methodologies, what's actually in the standards, it doesn't go very far. Safeguards are weak or non-existent. It might not go beyond do no harm, so it's not adequately implemented in methodologies. The requirement of additionality, as already mentioned a couple of times before me, can be a barrier for first movers and early adopters to be recognized for the benefits that they deliver and the past efforts they took already. Small-scale farming system, disproportionate costs between cost to access schemes versus the available land, so that can be definitely a barrier. Also diverse systems, so methodologies sometimes reach their limits when it comes to mixed farming systems, diverse farming systems with intercropping, diverse crop rotations, etc. It's just much more difficult and complex to robustly and adequately assess the impact. And very importantly, often it takes a very narrow approach, so it does not look at the whole farm. The graph that you can see on the right side, it's just an overview that was prepared by when the carbon removal expert group started, and it was looked at what kind of different methodologies are there and what's the scope they take. So this is not an exhaustive list of methodologies, but just to give you an overview that very little of the methodologies really look at the whole farm, and most of them focus on specific aspects. And when I say whole farm, what I mean is really at farm level, what is the carbon-climate balance at farm level, taking into account all the inputs and outputs to the farming system. So many of the methodologies are not very adequately assessing agroecological systems and the benefits they're providing on farm level, but also on product level. So I wanted to bring the example of life cycle assessment, which is the basis then of product environmental footprint, product climate footprints. And so this is a product level assessment, but it disregards a lot of aspects that are important for a farming system. So it fails to adequately reflect externalities, and often basically it's an indicator of yield, and by that favoring intensive agricultural farming systems, and also rewarding and increasing efficiency, and without sufficiently considering externalities. And why I wanted to bring this example is to show that no indicator, no methodology is neutral. So while they are scientifically sound, the choice and the weighing we are giving to several aspects is a political decision, and it's a political choice. So, and a methodology and indicators that we are deciding on, they mirror a political or a vision that we have on the future of agri-food systems. And I think that's also very important in the context of what will this methodology be used for? Will it be for voluntary carbon markets, insetting, but also potentially the CAP, for example, so the Common Agricultural Policy. So yeah, we really have to think about, are we capturing adequately all farmers, or are we maybe leaving some out? So to conclude, what do we need to represent and reflect also organic farmers in frameworks is, on the one hand, a systemic and whole farm approach, so really to look at the whole farm system, not only at single fields or at single practices, but really at its entirety and complexity, to have strong safeguards in place for aspects that are besides of carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, so biodiversity, water quality, etc. At the moment, many public subsidy schemes, but also others, don't really reflect the proportionality between the provided benefits and the remuneration. So the benefits that the farmer is providing for ecosystem services, for example, and the remuneration the farmer is receiving. So yeah, so I think there also has to be a match between the two of them. First movers should be fairly recognized and supported. So also maintenance of carbon stocks should be considered in the one way or the other, because it will be, especially in some regions in Europe, also that will be a challenge in the future. And also those farmers, yeah, need support. It goes in line with, I think, other aspects that I've said already, but practices should be incentivized that really deliver on multiple benefits, because yeah, we have multiple crises to solve, so we need practices that deliver on all of them. And lastly, the methodologies that we are designing, that we are using, should really aim to include all environmental and also social impacts. Thanks.
Thank you a lot, everyone, and thank you a lot, Hanna. The first question is targeted to you. How do you see the potential of carbon farming and the CRCF to benefit organic farmers and regenerative farmers financially?
So I think many of the points that I've outlined at the end of my presentation are an issue and also a barrier for organic farmers and first mover farmers and farmers that take a holistic view and approach to their farm to be adequately reflected and also remunerated then, or to access those kind of schemes. And I think it's also important to take a bigger view, so it can be one contribution, but it won't solve structural issues that are present in the sector at the moment. And there is also a lot of other support and rewarding schemes that are crucial that we should look at. The role of advisory services was mentioned already. There is opportunities in terms of value chain agreements or market development, working on the demand side of the coin. And I think there are still a lot of questions to answer also when it comes to price. So how much does a farmer get for the additional efforts, price volatility, risks that farmers are taking? So who bears the risks in when it comes to unintended consequences or events that are outside of the control of farmers? So yeah, I think it's quite mixed.
Thank you. So who bears the risks is a very important question. And Lynn, so in Bioland, I'm usually asked, like from farmers, what are the risks participating in carbon farming schemes? What should I take care of? And I wanted to ask you, which risks do you see and what would you answer our farmers?
Yeah, so maybe starting with the good thing first. So I think the good thing about the carbon credits and the voluntary market is that it raises awareness on the climate topic. And this is a chance for the farmers to come into consideration of the climate implications on the farm. But due to this higher interest, of course, also bigger businesses are getting involved more on the farming decisions, and they're getting more involved in deciding certain things. And although this is just a small anecdote, but I have been in a room with one of those big food global player actors, and at one point he just said, yeah, I just don't care what the farmers want. I'm deciding what practices they are doing. And I think that's super important to mention this here in this discussion, because it shows the risk that industry is then doing the decisions for the farmers, and the farmers have to deal with whatever the industry decides, and it's not a collaboration, but it can become a risk for the farmers to have more pressure of the industry. And I'm pretty aware that this can be a 1 in a million case, but I think it's not a 1 in a million case. So I think this happens, and it's important to pinpoint this risk that, it's putting more pressures on the farmers from the businesses. And this is sometimes really challenging for the farmers, because businesses are sometimes not aware of farmers' realities. And so a lot of the decisions on methodologies and how the carbon credits will look like are often not involving the farmers' reality that they have on their farms. And that's something which should be really avoided also with the carbon credits in nowadays at the moment.
Thank you a lot. And maybe linked to that, Chiara, so you're working with farmers very closely. And I wondered, what makes your model very successful, and how do you plan to scale it, and what would be success factors for that?
Yeah, yes, I think, as Aline said, often farmers are requested to do things without listening their needs, and without maybe knowing how to do things in a way that can be a sort of win-win and successful for each part. So really building a model that can be integrated them in the discussion and involving them during all the process stage. I think it's fundamental also to be sure that these practice that we are applying and carbon farming practice, different practice, can be long-lasting during time, and not only just for the income from carbon or for now the law at this moment, but that can really integrate it into a future vision and in a future design of farming, enabling really a transformation of the agri-food system.
Thank you, Paul. You've mentioned first movers, and we were talking about the transition of systems, but we also already have those innovators in the system that have done many things. And I wondered, how do you guarantee that first movers can also profit participating in your scheme?
So I guarantee anything. I guarantee nothing. Just to be clear, what we know is that regenerative practices have environmental benefit. And what we know is that there is long-term research that shows that you've been implementing some regenerative practices, not all of them. You've started to store, and you can keep storing. Not all of the time. So I think it has been mentioned about program to also reward the storage. Like if you maxed out, keep the carbon in place. That's very important, and I hope the CRCF will touch on that, and not just increasing stock content, but keeping the stock content level, the soil organic carbon level. But no, I guarantee nothing, but we worked with agronomists, and we try to look at the farm level what is possible. We look at the soil sample, what the soil tells us, and we look at what are the practices implemented, and the agronomist with the farmer. I think that's very important. The farmer are leading our program, and we're not imposing anything. We're not imposing practices. We know the pillars of regenerative agriculture. They decide what they want to implement. At the end of the day, what I tell them, I can only sell carbon for now. So that's because the market doesn't exist. The day the market will exist to go and use those soil samples to measure, like organic life in the soil, and there's credit for that, we will be with the same methodology working on that. And if there is like measurement of habitat or whatever species, but I guarantee nothing. We work with the farmer, he decides what he wants to implement. But as of today, we also tell the farmer the only market is for carbon. Now there's biodiversity, certificates start to put like carbon plus kind of thing, where you're gonna value also what is the biodiversity performance on your farm, if I can call it like that. You can criticize all these words. But anyway, like, I don't guarantee anything, but we tell the reality about which market exists and what can we monetize, and it's carbon as of today.
Thank you a lot. Yes, that's also very interesting. And we also said that a rewarding scheme could also be provided through advisory services, so somehow that also rewards farmers. And I wanted to ask, which role do you all think farmer advisors in future will play for future climate resilient farming? So that's an open question to all of you, and maybe someone just wants to react spontaneously.
I worked at Bioland with one of the super good climate advisors. he was a pioneer starting his work, I don't know when it was, 2010, 2011, something like this. You started at Bioland working on the climate topic already. And he was one of the very few people, so I think in total at Bioland there were 3 climate advisors at the beginning. I don't know how many you are now, so I think there is really the task to integrate more advisors. This is partly done now at the European level with the Climate Farm Demo project and Climate Smart Advisor project, where really more advisors get trained. And I think they have a super important role on addressing this. And maybe I can give an example how this works outside of the European Union. So there's the Economy of Love scheme, which is initiated from an organic and biodynamic farm in Egypt, actually. So it's one of the oldest biodynamic farms in the world. And they have structured this in not just carbon crediting scheme, but they have structured a holistic sustainability crediting scheme. I don't know if there's even a name for what they did, to really spread organic farming throughout whole of Egypt. And it's very impressive because they have even started to build up a university, because they said we need more farm advisors because we can't reach whole Egypt being organic without having advisors going on the fields. So they started to build up a university, training tremendous amounts of farm advisors, going on the fields, training the farmers, and now I think they have already they have already switched more than 15,000 farmers within the last 2 years to organic, so that that they really switched to organic practices by the farm advisors and by financing this via accrediting schemes. So that's one of the very successful models how this combination of crediting and farm advisory could really foster the transformation process in a way. Yeah, sorry, that was too long, but it's a very motivating thing. You should check it out.
Thank you for sharing.
It's Economy of Love, and it's the crediting scheme called, and it's originating from Segem. So this is the farm, yeah.
Yeah, from what we've seen, obviously we have agronomists allocated at each farm, and farmers, they really like it, like to have this kind of input and being able to engage with the agronomist on what is the right roadmap and what are the risks and what can I, what leverage I have, and a continuous discussion. This is the first value they get before any credit, before any measurement, and they really like it. Mm. What we've seen also is like between farmers, generally when they're in the same region, we have clusters, and sometimes they share the agronomist, and they also advise themselves, and they group, they walk the field together, and they can come up with they have different farming systems sometimes, but sometimes elements overlap, and they really exchange. So the advice is also agronomists, but also between farmers that start to, the program a bit at the same time, and they share their experience and what they've observed on their respective fields.
Yeah, that would be my point.
Okay.
Sorry.
No. But no, to highlight the importance of also to exchange farmers to farmers. So maybe same problems. So yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on the importance of advisory services. I think in that context, it's also important that we're talking a lot about data and information that the farmer gives, but that this information is also flowing back to the farmer in a way that enables decision making and supports decision making on the farm. So I think that's also crucial in this regard. And but we also need the advisors that are trained to give independent advice on those aspects, and that's also not everywhere the case at the moment, right? I mean, we also see it in organic farming that we have some projects ongoing to really create networks of organic farm advisors, but that also requires training and a specific lens and focus to it. So, yeah.
I maybe add one additional point, because I'm not sure if the majority of you are aware, but currently several of the climate projects, so this is Clean Farms, Climate Farm Demo, Organic Climate Net, the new research project on climate, which I'm not aware of the name at the moment, sorry, Climate Smart Advisory, are currently structuring a knowledge repository, which will be online in a few months, where many information about climate-friendly practices, about fact sheets, and all of this practical implications will be published online. And I think this also shows that it will not be only the farm advisors, nor the farmers, nor the crediting. It will be this really tremendous effort that each and everybody of us has to do. So the policymakers, the advisors, the farmers, the scientists, the value chain, it will be all of us together that just manage to develop this further.
Yes. And looking into the future, so let's try to do that together. How do you see carbon farming and the CRCF shaping the future of European farming and agriculture?
Big question.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
So
go ahead. Okay. So I think it can be one puzzle piece, but it won't solve the structural issues and the other maybe barriers or factors that make it difficult at the moment for farmers to produce more sustainable. So I think we really have to work on several fronts there and take a food systems approach to things. So it cannot be seen in isolation with other aspects. We will definitely have to look at the common agricultural policy, because that's just a very big factor of shaping EU agriculture. And we need to ensure that policies are coherent and aligned and are actually pointing in the similar direction. So to send a clear signal and not contradicting pathways. I mean, we have a agri-food vision now since like 2 weeks by the Commission, so that's a first step. And yeah, but carbon credits alone won't be a reason for farmers to stay in agriculture or to maybe for young farmers to engage in agriculture. So there's a lot of work that also has to be done in terms of rural areas, supply chain development to actually have markets for products, and and one big aspect is of course also remuneration. So fair price for products and remuneration, fair remuneration for ecosystem services. So I think it's a big question, it's a big answer, but I think it would be I would lie if I would give a simple answer to this question, I think.
Build a framework that bring money to farmers, to keep it really short. And that means, and I'm not just focusing on carbon, but you need to build a framework that clearly bring transparency on how much money goes to the farmers. It comes from VCM, it comes from inset, it comes from valuing co-benefits, it comes from whatever you want. You need to get there. And I think we touched on how and the limits and collaboration between all the stakeholders. Scientists are key because they bring the robustness to be able to go get the price from the buyers. And when I say scientists, I talk about the model on the long-term experiment, I talk about the one involved in analyzing the soil, and that's how we're going to get the value. And transparency within the supply chain. We need to talk about money, not just claim and communication. So that's very important.
Any other ideas in the room?
I'm just wondering, like, what brings people into actions, and how can we really make a step in this climate action debate to move forward? And there, I think the consumers, and there I would include each and everyone in this room here, is having the huge role of starting to understand that food and producing food is a very valuable resource, and you can either destroy with it the environment or you can do something really nice in a cooperation with the environment. And I think this has to do a lot with the narratives that we are currently having in our political debates, or that the narratives that are structured by agribusinesses and so on. So I think if I would have a wish, then I would really start to restructure the current narratives that we have about food and how food should be produced, or how it should be valued and monetized in a way. And I know that's a big task, but I still have the feeling that we're, like, if I compare the work I have to do nowadays to the work that I had to do 20 years ago, I think there's already a little bit improvement into what kind of narratives we are telling one another when we talk about food.
And if I can add on this, just keeping in mind that food isn't a commodity, no?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't just something that can be exchanged, but it's culture. It involves all of us, no? And so we need to produce healthy foods in a sustainable ways, and also considering also the small scale farming in these carbon aspects, and not leaving only the big one or the to be rewarded for and financed by.
So in the morning session, we were also talking in one panel about permanence of carbon, and we were then afterwards also talking about permanence of farms. So we were just wondering, like, and I want to ask you, how could we create a long-term perspective for our farmers in future?
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate permanence of this RegenAg play, it's when at the farm level, what we call theoretically the regenerative transition happen. So the farmer, he start to look at his farm and he say, he doesn't need credit anymore, he doesn't need you to come and compensate him, it's just more profitable, it's more resilient, it's better food, it's more healthy for him and the environment, like, and he can see that. You just need to help him to get there. And that's the credits, and that's what we try to value, the co-benefits to help this transition. So that's how permanence is achieved. MRV, yes, you need to monitor, yes, because the buyer, they need robustness, but the ultimate permanence is bringing everyone to the transition. Now, technology also help you to get there, but the financing for the time this transition happens is really what we're trying all to talk about here. We don't want to limit it to carbon. We want to value as much as possible, but it's always going to be like bringing everyone to this transition, because we know that when it materialized, that the market needs to help also this transition to happen. The buyers of agricultural product. That's the permanence in RegenAg.
I would maybe like to add to what you just said, Paul, about supporting the transition, and then it should basically be run by itself, no? I think in theory, that's a good idea, but I think in practice it's often challenging. We also see it on, like, there is conversion support for organic farmers, but if we look at how markets at the moment function, they don't reward those ecosystem services provided, they don't reward those additional efforts. So supporting the transition is certainly important, but we also have to keep in mind how our markets are currently structured, and also the impact that policies have on markets, because they're not just created by themselves, but they're influenced by policy decisions as well. So I think that's something to keep in mind also in the long run. So how can we ensure long-term remuneration for the provided benefits?
Yeah, I would totally emphasize the market value of food again in this direction, because if you can't finance a certain kind of doing agriculture, then the whole thing will not work in the long run. Although, of course, again, the narrative is important. It's important to have a clear vision of what you're contributing to the world if you're doing a certain kind of farming practice. It's important to network among one another, to collaborate and so on. So, but I think as long as we will not manage to value food in a true cost accounting system, it will be very challenging, be it organic or regenerative farmers, to be more stronger in the market. And I'm not sure if this is really on the consumer side to come to this development, although also there I see some hope that more and more consumers are getting aware what the value of food is. But I think it needs to be policy which are supporting this process and strengthening sustainable production and the true cost accounting. So.
And maybe it's a conjunction of factors, like you have a regenerative label, so consumer can contribute, but then you also have kind of regulation in the food and agriculture companies where they are obliged to share the value, and then you have this redistribution of value to the farmers, because that's the elephant in the room. Like, we're not talking about, there was problems of value to farmers before carbon being on the table. So, if we go back to consumer and label, there will be this question about how this goes up to the farmers to finance those regenerative practices. So,
yeah, thank you very much. And now I want to open this discussion to everyone in the room. And I wanted to ask you what your experience are with carbon farming and which challenges you see, which risks, and how we could support our farmers better. So are there any questions? You can also just ask open questions, or you can react to mine.
It's difficult to see you. We are so open. But we hope you're still there.
Oh.
Can you hear me? Ah, okay, thank you very much. I'm Giorgio. I'm from the Balkan Environment Center, Greece. I'm an agronomist. I have a question for Mr. Martin. Firstly, thanks everyone for your presentations. They have been very, very interesting. Mr. Martin, you had mentioned that you have to make a contract with the farmers, like a 10-year contract, because if we are going to apply regenerative agriculture, we need to get this long-term plan. And in agronomic point of view, it makes sense, obviously. But is there a stable source of money for this 10-year period? How can we be sure that the farmer is going to make this plan for 10 years? But have we got the stable source of money? And if you have some example to tell us, like is it from like an offsetting, for example, case, and are there companies that they are ready to make this type of long-term plans in economic point of view, that I'm ready to pay for the next 10 years if this and this and this? So I hope my question is clear. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So the short answer is no. The way we work right now with our farmer in France and Belgium, we, with our money, are funding agronomic support, so independent agronomists, they're not part of our company, that we deploy on all the farms. We have an agronomic credit over 5 years, and that is spent 30% the first year, 25% the second year, and 15% the 3 years after. We pay that with our money for now. Our wish is that this agronomic support will become as another element, it's not mandatory under our certification, to drive more value because it's more robust if you have this relationship with the farmer and that he has this third party that can come and discuss with him and provide the agronomic advice. So we're paying for it. Now what we hope for, and I don't have any guarantee, is that when we are certified, there will be appetite in the VCM market first to buy our credits, and that will allow us to fund more farmers. So, you sell credits, you can sell credit forwards. We've done it already. We've done it in Belgium. We work with a corporation, it's a non-profit. They have this policy of like supporting regenerative agriculture. They work with a network of farmers. They have buyers on the offsetting side of things. They bring this money and they bring their network of farmers, they pay the agronomists. So sometimes we have people we can rely on to support us. Sometimes we pay with our own equity. So that's the model for now. But if we want to scale up, we'll need to raise money. We need to sell some VCM forward. You're always going to go back to you need money on the table to bring robustness, to pay the farmer, and to support the farmer. I don't know if that answers your question.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Gabriele Antoniella, a researcher from the University of Tuscia. And first of all, thank you, because maybe it's for our young age, but what I listened during this month is really important from all of you, really from the importance of relationships that Chiara mentioned, and the food production, all words that should be at the bottom of the carbon farming. And I am wondering myself why we are talking about this at the end of this Congress. But the point is another one. I want to say two things. One, from scientific point of view, since I am a researcher about biochar, you were talking about we should understand from when the biochar comes from, and we did a publication which is called The Misconception of Soil Organic Carbon Sequestration, where we call it accumulation of carbon, like also the manure application, no? And it depends also by the distance. Then I will say something else, which is with another part of my life, since I'm a president of organic associations that put together many different stakeholders, and between them there are more than 100 farmers, organic farmers. And when I talk to them about carbon, it means a society of people that are advanced in doing organic farming and carbon farming and so on. I live in the center of Italy, really biodiverse area, no? And what I want to tell is my farmers, our farmers, they say where we do carbon farming in the future. Because at the moment there is an overlapping of the European policies. And I make a specific example. All of us agree with renewable energies, but we are mirroring our soils. So we don't see anymore the soil at the moment, but we see photovoltaic on the ground, which is maybe also really linked with the concept of land grabbing around the world and in Europe and in Italy too. So here there is an overlapping also for the objective of 2000, to change the Green Deal, let's say. And the second aspect they ask me is, President, to who we sell these credits? Because we decide to be organic farmers for a specific reason. Do you want to sell them maybe to some big multinational? That is the reason why we are fighting the climate change. So find a way to also establish a credible system to sell in a local way these carbon farming credits. Of course, we will change something. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for raising that, because I think it's a super nice example of having just this narrow lens of focusing just on the climate mitigation aspects. And actually for the agrophotovoltaic in Switzerland, they did quite a radical way of avoiding this just the climate focus by saying there should be no yield losses if you have, so as a farmer you need to ensure that you will not have any yield losses if you implement those agrophotovoltaic on your farm. And they did this on purpose to really avoid that we will have contradictions with other sustainability areas such as food production and biodiversity and so on. And I think that's so important. I think we can't stress this again and again and again in the debate, that once we start to narrow things to just one aspect, it will face challenges for other parts of the sustainability. And I'm happy to read your publication. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, and I think it also brings in the important aspect of ownership of land. A lot of farmers are on rented land, so that also challenges a bit maybe the long-term perspective or the investment cost that you want to take. I know it's not exactly the example you brought, but I think these two things go hand in hand. And also impact on land prices and what's happening on this land. So I think, yeah, that also has to be taken into consideration when we talk about carbon farming.
I'm Roberta Farina from CREA, Italy. And my impression is that carbon farming, in my opinion, I'm a scientist, was a way to reconcile science with farmers, because we have a lot of farmers asking information to scientists, which means that in some way they trust us to inform them about the opportunities of carbon farming. And we are working now with regenerative farmers. There is a big demand of research, of understanding what is going on in their farms, because they say we can see with our eyes, that soil is improving, that we don't have any more diseases or things like that, but we would like to have numbers, because sometimes numbers are lacking for this innovative way of running the farms and the land. What do you think about these two aspects?
Yeah, and it's super interesting that it's so difficult to publish the practical aspects of practical research. It's you will find very few publications from me, although I'm doing a lot of practical research, but they're impossible to publish in scientific German sometimes. So there's still a lot to do in that direction. Yeah.
But the data sharing is key. Is key to do anything at the farm and measure and be more accurate. Even if you go beyond the current methodology on carbon, it will be the same for biodiversity, it will be the same for water quality, water infiltration in the soil. You're going to have to improve models, get sample back from each farm to reinforce the models. And the only way to get there is to share. You need to, I mean, scientists, very practical example, like we need long-term data when we start a project. I'm going to call a scientist because we're going to see that, okay, for this crop type, this function, this soil type, this climate type is worked on something that we can calibrate on our farm. Then the discussion is like, okay, sometimes it's already public, but it's not in a form we can work with. He needs to have data, raw data to share with us. And so, but if he doesn't know that, he's not going to do it when he produces research. And then he's not going to want to go back. It's some time for him, and he's not part of the program, so he's not incentivized. So how do you create this framework where all the data is already ready to use, where project developer also enrich science, which we should really and farmers as well, because they are the project. So, and this is, I think in Europe the CRCF has to touch on that, because it's not just going to be just carbon or whatever European legislation, the link between science, project level, and how we make sure that everyone works in the same direction and collectively. And that will enrich, that will make everything more precise, that will help farmers, that will help scientists, that will benefit everyone.
Maybe can I add to that? Well, I think it's very important to get more context-specific information and data and information for farmers to enable them to take decisions. I think we should also keep in mind that there has been a lot of research on agricultural practices, and for several we know that have multiple benefits that we can implement also directly already without having risks or trade-offs in a way. So I think that's also something to keep in mind, that I think sometimes we get a bit lost into wanting to measure and have a result on every single aspect on every farm. But on the broader picture, we know quite some practices that are harmful to biodiversity, that are beneficial for biodiversity or carbon sequestration. So we should also think about how can we incentivize those activities and practices.
So thank you, everyone. I think
just adding on this now, and this measuring and gathering data could be also a tool for farmers to communicate their consumers what they are doing, in a sort of different ways. So just not producing food, but just a sort of spread knowledge on what are happening on a farm. So yes, sure.
So thank you. We want to quickly summarize. I think we saw again that carbon farming may provide some solutions to the system, but there are still many challenges that need to be solved. And so we heard a lot about safeguards and critical points from research. We got to know the market perspective and how to create revenue for farmers. Then we heard a farmer association and its perspective and how to support farmers and with advisory services, peer-to-peer advisory. And Hanna told us about the policy in general, how it should look like. And I want to ask you about one key message you want to provide for giveaway from this session. Lynn, you can start.
So I would like to start with climate change is real. It will be a threat for farmers, and it is already a threat for farmers. So we can't allow to wait the next 10 to 20 years for a shift. And organic agriculture is, from my perspective, the most sustainable systems that we have at hand at the moment to go for a system transformation.
I will hammer the point I mentioned since the beginning, sorry, but Regenerative is key, I totally agree, and we need to put the money on the table to allow farmers to realize that transition. And we need to listen to farmers on how we build our methodology, how we can improve them, and let them lead also this transition in a way. But it has to be about money given to them.
And yes, it's just about integrating different aspects and looking to with a systemic point of view and involving really different actors, because food is not only about farmers or buyers, but all of us. So we have to do it together and integrating different aspects, perspectives.
With the risk of repeating myself as well, but I believe we need to focus on holistic and systemic whole farm approaches that factor in all the externalities and impacts that agriculture has, because only like that we will enable really a transformation of farming system compared to improvement of single practices. And I think what we need is really a truly transformation of the system.
Thank you to all panelists and also to the audience. And with that, I would close the session now. Thank you very much.